Game industry in general is kind of weird right now. And Japan's especially weird because this is a part of the world where I think it's technically illegal to fire people in Japan, but there's ways that you can still get rid of employees if you have too many employees or whatever, or you're trying to make cost cuts, or everything that's been happening in the industry for the past 2 years where everyone's getting let down. Bandai Namco, in a current situation, selling like 3 million units of a new Dragon Ball game, by the way, better selling than Dragon Ball Fighters by a lot, is now reportedly cutting off a whole bunch of staff and killing projects. This is new news, but there was also this info that popped out from B&E, I think this year, where there was a similar thing where they were not talking about laying off staff members, but they were talking about canceling a ton of projects. In the same way that another developer, we had this happen earlier this year too, Square Enix had to do the same thing, where it's like, all right, so our Foam Stars stuff, some of these in-between titles, these things that aren't guaranteed success, you know, Platinum Games endeavors, aren't exactly pulling back a lot of money, and they are relatively expensive in comparison, so we're just gonna make sure we don't do those. Kind of stick to like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest and their breadwinners. That's what Square kind of talked about. If anything that you like about Square involves the words like Final Fantasy in any way, you're probably fine. But any of the other franchise titles that are kind of like smaller, there might have been a new Saga Frontier game, like who knows? That was probably canceled just because the history of them has not been particularly selling good of their smaller franchises. Bandai Namco said the exact same shit earlier this year, where they were like, yeah, so we're canceling a ton of projects. Like things that aren't our mainline projects, but kind of our smaller titles that aren't guaranteed success and things like that. Some of our, I think they said licensed titles, we're gonna cancel those too. And so it's like, oh shit, but they weren't laying people off. Now, several months later, here we are, and it's bizarre because Tekken 8 sold pretty dang good. I think it's selling better than Tekken 7 in this period of time. And dude, Sparking Zero is obviously blowing up because it's like the most ultimate Dragon Ball fan game ever made, even more so than Dragon Ball Fighters. So according to a report, B&E's approach to reduce staff is not to make them redundant, but to force them into leaving voluntarily. A traditional Japanese method that involves assigning people to no rooms or to rooms with no work-related tasks, where the staff members typically use their time to find other work before quitting. It's known as Oidashi Beya in Japan, and essentially means a company can avoid paying severance and steer clear of legal proceedings from firing employees to make use of Japan's robust labor protection laws. And yeah, that seems weird and crazy because it's actually illegal to fire people in Japan. So you cannot just get rid of folks, right? You can't just lay them off. The whole thing is that you have to force them to quit. And this is kind of what you sort of put somebody into a different office, a different building, and then they have no connection to the project anymore. It's sort of a big hint. Oh, well, you got let go. Please go. It's super weird. It's super effed up outside of being fired, you know? There's another person, you would be surprised, went through a very similar situation to this during the development of a massive game. And that game was Metal Gear Solid 5. Because that individual was Hideo Kojima when they put him in like a different building on a different floor and made it hard for him to communicate with his team. That was when Konami was almost aggressively disinterested in being a video game developer at the time. Woof, you know, it's brutal. The more hovering news piece around this is some of the games that are potentially getting canceled. This is talking about like how that practice works here. The industry has faced an alarming number of job losses throughout the year, and most notably publishers and developers with a downward trend after the spike from COVID-19. During this period, many businesses grew, and after the effects have resulted in significant redundancies and people just having jobs on jobs. B&E sent 200 employees those aforementioned rooms, resulting in about 100 resignations. Game projects canceled includes those that include Naruto games, One Piece games, and a joint project with Nintendo. You know how we were just talking about, Bandai Namco was talking about the earlier part of this year, how they're gonna cancel like a ton of projects, but likely not their breadwinning projects. To think that games like Naruto and One Piece, because anime licensed games, that is B&E's breadwinner, dude. That is where Bandai Namco has effectively made their revenue over the past like 10 to 20 years. Is like in anime franchise titles and stuff. And not all of them are particularly amazing. There's also, you know, the Dragon Ball aspect where they have to release pretty much a new Dragon Ball game every single year. This is theoretical, so that they can keep their Dragon Ball licensing, which is why there's so many Dragon Ball games constantly all the time and updates to them. Sparking Zero just kind of lines up with all that. To hear that, oh, my dude, I wonder if that Naruto or One Piece game or the joint project with Nintendo, I don't think that's Smash, but I wonder if it is something else. I really do, and I wonder if the Naruto and One Piece game was potentially an Arc System Works title. Stuff is changing, dude. Stuff is definitely changing. I'm very curious. That's the problem, is that these licensed games and the licensing for them is not cheap, and they have to make money on them. And there has been sort of rumors for a very long time, what the hell is Arc System Works working on? Why have we not heard what it is? What is happening? What are they working? Dude, it's been a long time, and we have not had a new ASW game for quite a while, dude. And there was a very, very, very large period of time where like, oh, it's probably a One Piece Fighters. It's most likely going to be the next big anime license game because it's not Dragon Ball Fighters anymore. That kind of has me worried, you know? It kind of has me worried if we never will find out what some of these things were, if not maybe the other ones, where some of their licensed games are now not going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them maybe were fighting games in some way. That's disappointing. People might not also realize that Bandai Namco made Smash Brothers. You say like, oh, but Max, Sakurai hand animated, designed, did the backgrounds, the music, and the audio. Sakurai produced all the music in Smash Brothers with his mouth. And I have to remind you, no, Sakurai was the director, has a ton of involvement, and obviously is the sort of champion of Smash Brothers and is the reason the game is as good as it is. But the game was made by Bandai Namco. B&E created Smash Brothers going all the way back into Smash Brothers for Nintendo DS when that came out. So to hear that Bandai Namco is now splitting projects with Nintendo and also canceling some things is kind of nuts. Do I think Smash Brothers is coming back in some way? Yeah, I do. And I don't think this would be obviously a Smash Brothers project, but it could have been something else. You know, we'll see. Outside of you understanding how crazy the tradition is of firing people in Japan and how weird it is that you have to get them to leave voluntarily, the craziest news for me is that, wow, they're actually canceling some of their big anime projects, which is no shit what made them who they are for the most part over the past like 10, 20 years. Not particularly a good sign, but more indicative how weird the Japanese video game industry is right now in a post-COVID situation. Square Enix doing the exact same thing. Nintendo in a different universe, but the one developer that has come out and is still kind of sitting pretty on top of all of this and keeps having banger year after banger year after banger year with extremely high quality titles therein for the past like 3 to 4 to 5 years has been Capcom. And they've been releasing a shit ton of games, and the majority of the games they release are pretty damn good. So they're setting up for having an amazing 2024 to 2025 with Monster Hunter. Who knows if Resident Evil 9 is somewhere on the horizon? But still, I'm thinking a lot of these companies are looking at a developer like Capcom now, which they weren't before. Hey, these are games that are theirs and they're not licensing and they're made on their own engine. And dude, they're making all the money in the world. They're making like all the goddamn money. Capcom's doing so good right now.